Hi guys, welcome back to Read Instead. I'm Jake. Glad to have you here today. As you can tell, that this is my first video that I'll be uploading to my channel. I'm excited. I thought about what kind of video I should first put on here. Of course, this is besides my intro video that I uploaded yesterday. I thought about maybe doing sort of a topical discussion on authors or series, stuff like that. Something that has to do with why we should read instead. But as inspiration would have it, I just finished this book right here about 10 or 15 minutes ago. And I think that it would be cool to maybe have a recurring sort of playlist on this channel where I give my instant reaction to a novel that I just finished. And I haven't really had much time to digest it or put my thoughts in order or anything like that. And I think that could be pretty cool. I think it's going to be organic. In saying that, I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but for me, books have a tendency to sort of grow and maybe shrink too over time. There's been books that I've finished, and for that day or the following days, I'm really excited, and it was a very I think about the book as a very entertaining novel. But as time goes on, it becomes forgotten in my mind, and therefore maybe doesn't hold such high esteem anymore. And in contrary to that, there's been books where I've closed them, and after finishing them, and like 6 months later, I still find myself thinking about it, and I'm intrigued by it. I want to open it back up and read, a chapter or certain passages that stuck with me. It's interesting how a novel can shape itself out differently as time goes on in our minds. That happens for me a lot. So it'll be interesting maybe in 6 months how I'll feel about this book. But I'm going to give you my honest, raw reaction to finishing this book just a few minutes ago. This book, as you can see, A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. This is a pretty, the reception was pretty good on this book as far as I can tell. I believe they made a mini-series out of it. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. It's different from most of the things that I read, but let me get right into it. This book, all in all, is a reaction to the dichotomy between a pre-communist Russia and communist Russia. This book takes place between the end of World War I, really. That's right when the Bolshevik Revolution began, communist revolution in Russia, and it goes all the way up until the 1950s. And it's through, obviously, the prism of one man. And this man, the gentleman in Moscow, is a man by the name of Count Alexander Rostov. Count Alexander Rostov. And what happens to this man is he's a poet, and he comes from a very affluent, wealthy family. And a new council that is formed within the communist government of Russia basically takes a dislike to one of his poems that he's written, and they feel that it is a offense to the newly formed People's Republic of Russia. And apparently this was a common practice back in especially early Bolsheviks time, where they would put someone on house arrest instead of going to prison, instead of just shooting them, which they did a lot of that too. I think what they would do with people who are of a higher esteem, and they were sort of an aristocrat before the revolution happened, because it wouldn't look good, I suppose, if they just went around just kind of shooting all old aristocrats of the old Russia. They just shot them all in the head and they were all dead. It just wouldn't go over well with the people. I don't know what their mindset was, but what they ended up doing to this Alexander Rostov is putting him on a lifelong house arrest in a fancy hotel. And that gives you the setting of this novel. As the novel goes on and continues, you see that this man encompasses the word gentleman, and not in a pompous, arrogant, looking down at the lower classes, not in that sense at all. He is a lover of manners. He's a lover of chivalry. He's a lover of how things are supposed to be in a polite society. And it's almost as though he's like ignorantly, it's like the phrase that kept coming to mind as I read this about Alexander is like he's ignorantly at bliss. Yeah. What happens is throughout this, since he's on house arrest in this hotel, the changing times of the Russia around him doesn't affect him that much. He's blocked off because of the walls of this hotel. He's blocked off from the changes and really the detrimental changes that begin to happen throughout Russia. And throughout the story, he has connections and friends from the outside that freely come and go, and they come and visit him, and they tell him of the changing times and what the government is doing to some of his old writer friends and stuff like that, and he just can't seem to wrap his mind around it. There's a passage in the book where a friend of his, a kid that he grew up with, and also a fellow writer, he comes to the hotel for a stay of 3 or 4 days, and he has this opportunity to connect again with Alexander. And he's basically just spends most of his time complaining about what's going on the outside and how the government is using their iron fist to squash art and artistry. And the Count Alex is like taken back by this, but this friend of his says this line to him, and it really stuck with me. And he says to him, "Would you have ever have thought?" I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he says, "Would you ever have thought that, however many years ago, when you got sentenced to house arrest in this hotel, you would have been the luckiest man in Russia?" And I thought that was pretty profound. There are, as time goes on, the Count sees how the outside, the changing time starts to affect the inside of the hotel little by little. There's this other scene that really stuck out to me where he sits down for a lunch in one of the restaurants. There's 2 main restaurants in this hotel, and they really play a big role in the story. Most of the scenes, a lot of the pivotal scenes take place in this one particular restaurant that he goes to a lot. And he's in this restaurant and he sits down, and there's a new waiter who comes to him. And this guy, like the Count, he just knows he knows everything there is to know about fine dining and fine cuisine and wine. If you're a food lover, if you're a French food lover of fine cuisine, you'll get a kick out of this book, because there's a lot of that sort of intertwined in the scenes in this book. But he sits down at this lunch, and a new waiter comes over to him, and he's ordering his meal, and the waiter says to him, "Would you like white or red wine with that Chateau de some French delicacy?" And he replies, "Well, I would like this particular type of wine." And the waiter just responds to him again, "Would you like red or white?" And he's kind of like a little taken back, and he doesn't really know what to say. So what he does, he just says, "Excuse me for a moment," to the waiter, and he calls over the maitre d', who runs the restaurant, who's a friend of his, and he explains the situation. He says, "I don't understand why this young man, he's not like angry about it or anything. He just was like, maybe he's new here," and he says, "I don't know why." He's not understanding when I'm trying to order the type of wine that I want that goes perfectly with this meal. And the maitre d' says, "Alex, come with me for a moment." And he takes him down to the wine cellar. And he goes down there, and to his shock and amazement, he sees that every bottle of wine is stripped of its label. And the maitre d', who's taking him down into the basement, says gives him some reason why this is happening, because the label, if the wine remains labeled coming in from these Western countries, it'll have a detrimental influence on Russia. It's an idea of individuality, and not the collective, that any wine might stick out and stuff like that. It's really a poignant part and an eye-opening part when the Count realizes this is getting insane, and he doesn't understand why. He just can't understand why the people of Russia would prefer to live like this. So that theme of the changing of Russia, the iron fist coming down, the classless system, it's interwoven all throughout the novel, which I found to be intriguing. He develops a lot of close relationships. One in particular, basically he adopts a daughter, and I'm not going to give too much away. Through a series of circumstances, he ends up adopting a daughter, and this daughter makes the Count's heart grow. I really began to like the Count. In the way he treated people, that the way that he is such a gentleman. And when you think of the word gentleman, it has to do with you're caring of other people, and you're considerate of other people, and he really he embodies that big time. There's a sort of a trio of friends, the maitre d' at the restaurant that he goes to, and he actually ends up working there at some point. After that scene that I just told you about when he goes down to the wine cellar, he begins being the head waiter at the restaurant, and he between him and the maitre d', basically like the manager of the restaurant and the head chef, those three men sort of take it upon themselves to keep the standard of the restaurant at a certain level, and that standard is not the outside influence. It's what came. It was Russia before that, and then there's also like a seamstress that works there that he becomes very, very friendly with, and they all sort of have their own. So Alex, the Count, has his own sort of crew inside the hotel that he can confide in, and he has a trust with them, and they see him and they know who he is, and that he's sort of saddened and depressed by what's going on. He doesn't let that really it's not like he wears that on his sleeve or anything. It's more just like it's tragic circumstances that he's observing. This outside influence from the changing of Russia. By the way, going forward, I'm gonna when I rate books, I'm going to use the rating system that's on Goodreads, and I'll make a whole nother video on this. But Goodreads has essentially monopolized book reviews amongst just readers. And they have their own rating system on there, and it's just 5 stars. A lot of times what I'll do is if I, because there's a big difference between a 4-star book and a 5-star book, or at least I would want there to be. So a lot of times on Goodreads, and I'm not alone in this. I actually picked this up from other people, but they'll put a certain amount of stars, and then in the review that they write, they'll say 3.5 stars. They'll put 3 stars for their grade, but then they'll write in 3.5. They'll put 4, they'll put in 4.5. So it's like it's just right under, just a book that'll remain with you forever, a book that you'll never forget. That's what I would consider a 5-star book. So what would I rate this? I would rate it, I'm going to give it 4 stars on Goodreads, but I'm going to write in 4.5. The only thing that I felt that it was lacking is just a little bit more changing of plot. There are times when the Count sort of gets himself into these risky scenarios, these jackpots, if you will, whatever you want to call it, and it gets pretty entertaining when that happens. But a lot of it is just him and these discussions that he has with people, and the dialogue is phenomenal. This guy, this is the first book that I read by Amor Towles, and he is a phenomenal writer. There was a passage in the book. I was gonna read it, but I don't feel, I'm just not ready to start reading in my reviews yet. But there was a passage basically of the Count just waking up in his room and making a cup of coffee. And as simple as something like that sounds, the beauty and the language that Amor Towles uses to someone waking up and cranking a crank to ground the coffee beans down and putting it on, mixing it in with the hot water and through the strainer and stuff. It's 2 paragraphs, and I just remember as I finished the paragraphs, I was just taken back. I took I took a picture of it and sent it to a friend of mine who's an English teacher. And by the way, there's dozens and dozens of passages like that in this book. I don't know what genre you'd put this in. I suppose it's a drama. It's a drama. There is a little bit of comedy. There's definitely a little bit of comedy woven throughout the novel. But I would recommend it. You'll enjoy it, and I think it'll be a book that will sit with you in the days to come afterwards. So thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Take care.